In the summer of 1962, a team working the slopes of Masada, the desert fortress where Jewish zealots made their final stand against Rome, pulled something unusual from a sealed storage chamber. It was a cluster of date palm seeds, carbonized, preserved by the dry Judean air for nearly 2,000 years. Decades later, one of those seeds was coaxed back to life. It germinated. A tree that had not grown on earth since the time of the New Testament began producing leaves again. And when researchers tested the chemistry of that ancient lineage against modern date cultivars, they found something the pharmaceutical industry has quietly known for decades. The ancient plant contained compounds the modern one had lost. That is where this case begins. And it is not the only plant in this file. 10 plants are named repeatedly across the pages of Scripture. 10 plants grew in the soil the prophets walked on. 10 plants fed, healed, and anointed the people God chose to preserve His Word. And modern research has confirmed, plant by plant, that these are not decorative details. They are a pharmacy. A pharmacy that sits in your grocery store right now, mostly ignored, while the conditions they were designed to address fill every waiting room in the country. This investigation walks through each one. By the end, you will understand why certain physicians have spent their careers studying biblical botany in silence. And you will know exactly what to put in your cart this week. Begin with the olive. Genesis 8, verse 11, records the dove returning to Noah with a freshly plucked olive leaf. The leaf, not the fruit. That detail has never been accidental. The olive leaf contains a compound called OL European, which researchers studying Mediterranean longevity clusters have connected to blood pressure regulation, viral suppression, and arterial flexibility. Extra virgin olive oil, cold pressed, carries a fraction of that compound into the kitchen. 2 tablespoons a day is the amount consistently observed in populations with the lowest recorded rates of heart disease in the Western world. The second plant is the fig. Isaiah chapter 38, verse 21, contains one of the strangest medical prescriptions in the Bible. The prophet instructs that a lump of figs be pressed onto King Hezekiah's boil. The king recovers. For centuries, scholars treated this as a quaint folk remedy. Then, researchers examining the latex sap of the common fig identified enzymes called phycins that dissolve necrotic tissue and accelerate wound closure. The prophet was not guessing. He was applying pharmacology recorded nowhere else in the ancient Near East. The third plant is the pomegranate. Exodus 28 describes pomegranates embroidered onto the robe of the high priest. Song of Solomon returns to the fruit again and again. The seeds contain punicogens, some of the most potent plant antioxidants ever measured in a laboratory setting. Studies on men with prostate concerns have documented measurable slowing of PSA doubling time with daily pomegranate juice consumption. The fruit that decorated the garments of Aaron is now sitting in the refrigerated section of your supermarket. The fourth plant is barley. John chapter 6 verse 9 names the 5 loaves that fed the multitude as barley loaves, the bread of the poor. Barley contains beta-glucans, soluble fibers that researchers have repeatedly linked to cholesterol reduction and blood sugar stabilization. The miracle on the hillside was performed using the grain most associated with the working body. Modern wheat has been bred for speed and yield. Ancient barley retains what wheat has lost. The fifth plant is the grape. Numbers chapter 13 records the spies returning from Canaan, carrying a single cluster of grapes so heavy it required 2 men and a pole. Grape skins contain resveratrol. Grape seeds contain proanthocyanidins. Both have been studied extensively for their effects on vascular inflammation. The land God promised was a land of this fruit specifically. That is not decoration. That is diet. Here, the investigation turns. Because if these plants are as documented as the evidence shows, a reasonable person must ask why the average American Christian has never been taught any of this from a pulpit, a doctor's office, or a nutrition label. The answer is not hidden. It is historical. In the early 20th century, American agriculture underwent a deliberate restructuring. Commodity crops, corn, soy, refined wheat, and cottonseed oil were subsidized into dominance. The Mediterranean and Levantine food pattern, built on olive, fig, pomegranate, barley, and grape, was displaced in a single generation. The pharmaceutical industry that rose alongside that shift built its revenue on the conditions the displacement created. The plants were not banned. They were simply buried under cheaper substitutes and forgotten. Return to the evidence. The sixth plant is the mustard seed. Matthew chapter 13, verse 31, uses it as a parable of the kingdom. The seed is small. The plant grows large. Researchers studying the glucosinolates in mustard have documented powerful anti-inflammatory activity, particularly in the respiratory tract. A traditional mustard plaster, pressed against the chest during congestion, was standard medicine in American homes until the 1950s. It was not superstition. It was chemistry. The seventh plant is hyssop. Psalm 51 verse 7 asks God to purge with hyssop. Exodus 12 uses hyssop to apply the Passover blood to the doorposts. The plant carries carvacrol and thymol, the same antimicrobial compounds that make oregano medicinally active. Hyssop tea was kept in the cabinets of European monastery infirmaries for respiratory infections for over 1,000 years. The eighth plant is garlic. Numbers chapter 11, verse 5, records the Israelites in the wilderness longing for the garlic they had eaten in Egypt. Egyptian medical papyri preserved in museum collections list garlic in dozens of preparations. Modern cardiovascular research has connected raw garlic consumption to measurable reductions in blood pressure and platelet aggregation. 1 clove a day, crushed and rested for 10 minutes before eating, activates the compound called allicin. That 10-minute rest is the difference between garlic as seasoning and garlic as medicine. The ninth plant is flax. Hosea, chapter 2, verse 9, references flax alongside wool as a covering for the body. The seeds carry lignans, an alpha-linolenic acid, an omega-3 fatty acid that modern diets have almost completely lost. 2 tablespoons of ground flaxseed, stirred into water or yogurt, delivers what a modern Western plate rarely provides. The 10th plant is the almond. Numbers chapter 17 records the rod of Aaron budding and producing almonds overnight, a sign of divine authority. Almonds carry magnesium, vitamin E, and monounsaturated fats in a ratio that supports cardiovascular and neurological function. A handful a day has been associated in population studies with reduced markers of cognitive decline. 10 plants. 10 distinct pharmacological profiles. 1 shared origin in the text of Scripture. And here is the final piece of evidence, the one this file has been building toward. In the medical writings of Moses Maimonides, the 12th century Jewish physician who served as court doctor to the Sultan in Cairo, there is a recurring instruction preserved across his surviving medical works. The instruction is simple. Before reaching for a compounded remedy, he wrote, "Return first to the foods of the land of Israel." He understood what the Cairo-Geniza documents later confirmed, that the Jewish communities preserving the full biblical food pattern were outliving and outlasting the populations around them by significant margins. The prescription was not an herb formula. It was a return. The return is still available. Olive oil on the counter, figs in the drawer, pomegranate in the glass, barley in the soup, grapes on the plate, mustard on the sandwich, hyssop or oregano in the tea, garlic crushed and rested, flax ground fresh, almonds in the hand. 10 plants. 1 pantry. A pharmacy, older than every institution that has tried to replace it. The evidence is in your kitchen, or it is not. The choice belongs to you. Scripture did not record these plants as poetry. It recorded them as provision. And provision ignored is not provision lost. It is provision waiting. Which of the 10 plants is already in your home this week? And which one have you never tasted? Leave the number in the comments. Subscribe to follow this archive as it grows, because the next file opens a sealed jar recovered from a cave near the Dead Sea, and what was inside it has changed what we thought we knew about the bread the prophets actually ate.